Welcome to the Leading Conversations podcast, sponsored by the Excel Leadership Network. On each episode, JD Pairing will have conversations with church planting pastors and leaders from around the country. You can learn more about how to connect with Excel at the end of this podcast. Let's join JD now and listen in on this leading conversation.
Well, welcome to another Leading Conversations podcast from Excel Leadership Network. Today, we are thrilled to have with us the brilliant Billy Claudio from Scottsdale, Arizona. Billy, thanks for being here.
Great to be here. Thanks for having me a part of your ministry, and love what you do. Love the work that God does through you guys and planting churches all over the place. So it's been a joy to be a partner with you.
Yeah, it's been great. You guys host our Accelerate a couple times a year. We love coming down to Scottsdale. What's the weather like in Scottsdale today?
Oh, people don't want to hear. It's beautiful. Mid-70s. I have this long sleeve shirt on, and I've regretted it all day. So it's a short sleeve shirt day. It's just beautiful.
Well, somebody has to live in Scottsdale.
Yeah, the Lord called us, and we were willing to take the suffering. So
Good. Hey, tell us your story. Tell us growing up and what that was like and how you came to Christ.
Well, I was born in a military family. My dad was in the Air Force, and so I was actually born in Arizona. It's kind of one of those funny things here. I'm in Arizona now. It's one of those things because I grew up in New York, and people think I'm from New York, but I was actually born here in this state because my dad was in flight training here in Arizona.
What Air Force base was that?
He was at the Williams Air Force Base.
Williams.
And Luke as well. He flew the F-100s in the Vietnam War. Lived in Europe for a few years when I was young, and then we planted where my father was from, which was in Long Island, New York, and was raised Catholic. My mom was a devout Catholic. Her side of the family was really devout. My dad's side was Catholic too. They just weren't so devout. They were, more of your just kind of casual Catholics. But I was raised in that environment, and some of our travels we took around, we left New York a couple times, ended up in Colorado, where my mom had a conversion experience out of the Catholic Church. She got born again in the kind of charismatic renewal in the Catholic Church.
Oh, yeah.
Started going to Bible studies and things like that. I was probably 8 or 9 years old when she started kind of going to Bible studies. We left Colorado, went back to New York, and she kind of continued in that process. We slowly started not going to the Catholic Church and just to small home Bible studies and things like that. It was actually at one of the home Bible studies that a guy had come in from Texas and was teaching and talked about Christ and what it meant to be born again and how to get to heaven. And, my brother and I was 12, he was 10. And in that small group, he said, does anybody want to, come to Christ? And my brother and I, at the same time said, yeah, we want to come to Christ. And we gave our hearts to the Lord when I was 12, when I committed my heart first to the Lord. And my mom was like all in, we were, anytime there was a Bible study, anytime there was a revival, anytime there was anything, we were there. It was, she was a overboard kind of mom that church and Jesus became everything, and everything else was secondary, school, whatever. It didn't matter. Everything was about growing. So I grew up in a pretty churched environment, particularly when we had people come in that would be there for weeks, and every night they would do something, and we were there every night. So I hated it as a kid, but I loved it because I was around. I look back at my life, I learned so much of the Word of God so young because I was forced in these environments. I could sleep under the chair if I wanted to, right. Fall asleep in the chair, but I had to be there. So, in my young spiritual life, I was tried to be a faithful Christian, up and down kind of in my teenage years, but started a Bible study in my school, and kind of tried to live my faith out as a young man. So,
wow. Well, how did you get called into ministry? Did you think about becoming a priest?
No. By the time we were pretty well out of the Catholic Church when I had started my Christian faith, and I think I was around a lot of spiritual environments, and I maybe had a little tug, but there wasn't a sure thing. I had decided to go to engineering school in Buffalo University, and had gone up there, and I was up there for like 2 weeks, and I sprained my ankle, like severely sprained my ankle, my first major injury of my life, playing basketball after classes, and my dad was secular, wanted me to, get an engineering degree, and I was
Mhm.
school worked for me. I was a good student, and my mom wanted me to go to ministry. So I called my mom when I got hurt because my dad and I didn't have that much of a relationship. But I called my mom. I'm like, Mom, I'm hurt so bad. I don't know what to do. So, and we lived about 8 hours from Buffalo. When she heard me call, she left home that night, drove all the way to Buffalo, picked me up, took me home, and 2 weeks later we were down in Tennessee, and she had always wanted to go to a Bible college herself, and she took me with her basically and said, we're going to Bible college together. So I kind of was forced into this environment in a sense of again, spiritual enrichment, because my mom really wanted to go to this place. But
That's amazing.
it is amazing, really. I give God credit for forcing the situation. I wasn't unhappy going, and I wasn't, disappointed leaving the university to go to Bible college. My dad was really disappointed, but I wasn't so disappointed. But when I was in Bible college, I had the privilege of working with some other people and writing Christian theater skits, basically Saturday Night Live theater skits, but with
Right.
biblical
Mhm.
messages. And when we graduated from school, we had lots of invitations to take our sketches to different churches. And so we began to travel to different churches doing our Christian ministry, drama ministry. And it just blossomed from one thing to the next to the next. We had one team, two teams, three teams, five teams, traveling full time. So I went from going to Bible college to getting involved in ministering in churches. And what we would do is we do a skit, and someone would speak between the skit. We do another skit, someone would speak. So a part of you is being trained as a communicator in between the sketches. You're almost like the pastor. Here you are, this young guy, 19 years old, 20 years old, standing in front of these churches, sometimes large churches, sharing in between the skits. So the instructional side of it from many different ways was very valuable. And I did that for about 7 or 8 years. Raised
What
up
was the name of the touring group?
New Life Drama Company.
New Life Drama Company. Okay.
Yeah. So actually, it's funny, I took back that ministry when I moved out to Arizona. I was here for about 10 years. And when I left, we got married with my wife. We left and we began to do ministry on our own. I was still working some with the drama company, but when we went to go work in South Carolina in the mid 90s at a church, I kind of stepped away from being connected to the ministry of New Life Drama Company. But when we came back at Arizona and started the church in Arizona, I took leadership of it again and ran it for about 8 years, right up to COVID. And COVID kind of put a stop to all kind of traveling ministry. So, but it was pretty amazing ministry. A lot of great fruit came out of it, raising up young men and women to honor God. Many of them are serving in churches now, pastoring churches now. So it's been a blessing in my life to have that kind of legacy as a part of my history.
That's incredible. Now, how did you meet Don?
Actually, at the New Life Drama Company. This is an interesting thing. So everybody loves this story. I was the first place after we graduated Bible college. We went to this conference that the man that started the Bible college held every year in Gatlinburg, Tennessee, and it was our first event ever as a drama company going out and doing something. So we did sketches at this conference, and my wife came with her mother to the conference, and she was 13 years old. So one of my responsibilities when I was there was to help with the youth ministry at the conference. And so we met when she was 13, and it's funny because she had a crush on me as the young guy that she saw on the stage, and she had this kind of faux crush on me. And liked me. Of course, she was just a 13-year-old to me. So I make fun of it now. I said we were cousins and from Tennessee, so it's no big deal. So, but her siblings, interesting enough, her siblings that are all older than her, eventually went to the school I went to and joined the drama company that I was in charge of. And so she stayed in contact sort of with me through her siblings. And then when she was 16, she moved to Tennessee with her mom, where I was, and again, we met each other, but she still had a crush on me, but she was just 16 at the time. And I didn't really get interested in her until she was 18. And then we got married when she was 19. So it's a special story. I mean, when she tells it, it's much better coming from her perspective because she had that love for so long for me. And I, obviously she had unrequited love for me because she was just a kid to me when I first met her, but it's a beautiful story. And, we were friends well before we became lovers in our life. So that really has helped us in our longevity in life. We're friends, and we've been friends for a long time.
No, that's a great story. So you went to South Carolina and worked in a church, is that right?
Yeah. We traveled on the road for a little while in our own ministry, doing music and theater and ministering the word, doing kind of revivals. And then a church in South Carolina named Cornerstone Christian Fellowship in Greenville and had invited us for years to come and work for them. And finally, it was kind of just a Lord's timing that we felt like we were supposed to go there. And we began to work as associate pastors, youth pastors there at that church. And we were there for about 5 years. And it was great for us because the truth, being with those pastors really helped us in preparation for the call we had to come out to Arizona, which is a really unique thing that happened, getting us to Arizona.
Well, talk about that. How'd you get to Arizona?
Well, we were in this church, and our pastor would have guest speakers come through, and there was a woman he had come in to speak at the church, and since she was there, he basically had her come to our staff and do a leadership teaching, and she was teaching in the leadership to the leadership team about prayer, the importance of prayer, and like when you feel like the Holy Spirit comes on you to pray for someone, you should just stop whatever you're doing and just pray, because the Holy Spirit's inviting you to participate in something at that moment. She said, like, for instance, every time I drive up through Scottsdale, Arizona, I get this burden to pray for a great church up there that God wants to raise up. And so I just pray. And then she just moved on and started, teaching more about what she was talking about prayer. Well, it's like when she said those words about a great church in Scottsdale, Arizona, those words left her lips, hit me right in my chest, like, great church in Scottsdale, Arizona. I was like, my wife was in the meeting as well. And when we left the meeting, I was like, babe, when she said this specific statement about a church in Scottsdale, Arizona, something happened in my chest. Like, I just felt like, I think we're supposed to go start that church. And her eyes got really big. She said, I felt the same thing. So it was like, well, guess what we're doing? So we knew really from an oracle from the Lord. It was to us, she said it, but it was like God spoke to us specifically that I want you guys to go start that church in Arizona. So we told our pastor, and 9 months later, we were in a U-Haul driving out to Arizona, and we didn't know anybody.
You didn't know anybody. So it was the old parachute drop.
I would never recommend anybody to do what we did. We were, my wife and I were formed to be able to manage that kind of stuff. But obviously when I look back and I see how people do it now, I'm like, why didn't anybody tell us? There was no preparation. There was no people we connected with. There was no support group that we knew. We didn't take any financial support with us. We just sold our house and said, well, this is our nest egg we're going to use to plant the church and see what God does. So there was a lot of hard work in the beginning, but again, we were kind of made for that kind of start.
What was the first thing you did when you just got to town? You didn't know anybody.
Well, the first thing we did, we had a friend that had traveled through the area, and he had said, hey, you guys are going to go out there. There's a church I knew that was out there that closed down. Maybe you could, it was in a house church. Maybe it would be something you could use. So the first thing that we did was we wanted to go find that place that he said was closed down, because it sounded like the right kind of place for us to start. And this is a funny story. So we're looking for this place. We kind of have an idea generally where it is in Scottsdale, and we were driving. I'm looking for the kind of road where maybe a sign would have been on a building or whatever. And I see this house that has this little, what looks like a sign been scraped off. And I said, babe, I think that might be the spot. And of course, we look at the property. It's got a house, and behind it's got a rather extra large garage. And I'm like, oh, that's probably where they were meeting in the church. So, we go knock on the door, and there's no answer. And so we knock again, no answer. So I turn around to go. And, Dawn's like, what do you think? I think somebody lives here, babe. I think this is somebody's house now. The church isn't here. Someone lives here. So as I turn to go, she opens the door and says, hello. I'm like, babe, shut the door. What are you doing? This is someone's house. And so I get her to start walking away, and we walk about 10 feet, and someone opens the door and says, oh, I'm sorry. I didn't hear the door knock. What is it? And so it was actually the first person that we met that we told the story about what we were doing. And they were like, oh, I know the guy that you guys did ministry with, back in the day. Well, if you guys want to come in and, I don't own all this. I'm just leasing this house right now. But if you want to come and, pray in this building, and I've got some friends that maybe would come pray with us, and, who knows what God will do. And that was the first thing that we did coming, that God just kind of orchestrated us connecting with someone that said, sure, you guys want to come pray? We're not really going to church anywhere. And so it was the beginning of connections that started.
Wow, that's amazing.
Yeah.
Your wife is a fairly bold person to open the door and just say hello.
Yeah, crazy is what I'd call it.
Now, the church grew. Talk about that. Just planting it and getting it
Yeah,
up.
it took about from that point on, it took about 9 months to go from, praying regularly to actually getting to our launch date where we had our first service, where we rented a local school and, put a team together and, started building people to be a part of that team. And before we had actually come to Phoenix, we had stopped through Tucson, Arizona, where we had known someone that kind of was a little supportive of what we were doing. And so we had a couple of people that had promised to come and be a part of our first service. There's some instrumentalists and some singers that would help us in the beginning. And both my wife and I play and sing a little bit. So we had some things that were helpful for us in the beginning. But 9 months from that time when we knocked on the door, we had our first launch service. And I think we had 30 or 40 people at the launch service. So, but that was the beginning. And
Yeah.
we had went 30 to 60 to 100 people over the next couple of years and went from one school to another school. And then the Lord orchestrated an amazing miracle for us, which is, I love the stories that happen like this. We were meeting in a school and we were probably running about 150 at the time. And there was a church that our kids were going to charter school at, that I had met the pastor there. And he was actually filling in for, a transitional time in the church. And just one day, the Lord put him on my heart, and I called him and said, "Man, I was just thinking about you today, and I wanted to see how you're doing, and just see if anything I can pray with you over." And he, out of nowhere, says, "Hey, have you ever thought about a merge?" And of course, it's like, no, I had never even thought about a merge. I didn't know you could merge churches. I didn't know that existed. And so we started a conversation where, the church wasn't doing very good. There was only about 30 people that were at the property where we actually meet now. There was about 30 people that were there, and we got into conversation. I met with his leadership team. Our leadership team came over and met, and we orchestrated a merge together of Oasis Community Church and the church that was here, Friendship Community Church. And of course, I had a stipulation. It's like, I can't change the vision of what we have as Oasis.
Sure.
And it's either going to be, and I wasn't trying to get the property, but, I never even considered a merge, but I said, this is what it would have to look like. I know this might be a no-go for you, but I just have to share my heart of what God's wanting us to do. And if you're okay with it, great. If not, no worries. We're still going to be friends. But they were like, yeah, we love what you're doing. We love what God's doing. And so we actually walked into a property that was, multi-million-dollar property that had about $300,000 in debt on it. So it was a pretty amazing miracle.
You're a trailblazer on that, because back in those days, that was a lot more rare. It's happening more and more now as the baby boomers are aging, and they seem to be a little bit more open to that than they were in the olden days, 20 years ago.
Yeah.
But yeah, how did that merge go?
Well, really good. It was, I knew it would be dicey in some ways, just because, you're connecting two different organisms together, and as you start sharing the same vision. The biggest key for me was, the leadership connection. So I was, at that time, I wasn't even full-time at that time. I was only part-time, because again, we hadn't raised a bunch of resources. I didn't have I was working, making money on a regular job while I was doing pastoral work. The church actually was buying. This is an interesting thing, and for church planners, it doesn't, wherever you might come from. What we did is we grew. This church grew as our economics grew. The church actually would buy a day of my time back. So we were working for me to go full time, but there was like, hey, the type of work I had, it gave me some flexibility. And they said, well, can we buy a day back so that you can just fully be engaged with church on that day? And so we had actually bought in 3 days of my time back up to that period of time. So it was kind of a blessing, but he was full time at the church we were going to. So right away, when we make the merge, it's like, I'm going from part-time to full-time. He's going full-time. So we had to work through just the relational context. And one of the goals I had was I just wanted to make him feel valuable, important, that, his life mattered. And even though he was going to be second in leadership, that was going to be a safe place to be. So I worked really hard at trying to manifest the beauty of that in the beginning, caring highly for where he was, because I knew it was going to be tough for him.
That's really a sign of honor, and I think that's one of your characteristics, that you do honor people. Hey, what was your side gig? What was your job?
I did window washing.
Window washing.
Yeah. One of the first guys that I met, his brother had a window washing company, and I found out I could make a couple $100 a day doing window washing, and I had flexibility of schedule. I could work even, early mornings, and, I could be done with my window washing by, 9:30, 10 and have the day. So I just have to say, my wife and I worked really, 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 really hard the first few years, and it was probably a little out of balance. But when you have this vision, this drive, this desire, you put all your eggs in a basket. You just drive and drive and drive and drive, and I'm thankful for the work ethic that we had. But over time, if you don't shift that
Yeah.
drive and that work, it can catch up with you, and there can be some payment that you pay because you don't take care of yourself. And inevitably, that is what happened to me. I had a physical breakdown because of we just worked. I just always worked hard. I never took breaks. Like, we didn't take vacations. If I was ever gone, it was never more than one weekend. And it was my mindset with that kind of stuff and taking care of myself was, just work hard. I'm working for God, and just got to work hard. That's just life. So I had to learn a lot in ministry.
Can you talk about that physical breakdown? Tell us about it.
Yeah, it was, I noticed that I was getting kind of tired on kind of, I was being, 8 hours I was tired, 7 hours I was tired, 6 hours I was tired. I just started getting tired in shorter fashions. And I eventually got to the place where I had just zero energy. Like, I had, I'm sure my adrenal glands were blown, because I'm always the kind of a go-getter. And, if you ask me to do it, I'm going to step up to the plate and get it done. Even if I should have said no, I probably didn't say no because I wasn't smart enough to say that's not a good idea. But I had basically just got to the place where I was worthless. And when I say it, I mean, I just had no energy. When it came to sermon preparation, I got to the place where I'm a very creative soul. Creativity is just a natural part of my dynamic. And I would sit here and I would stare at my screen in preparation for sermons and for 2 hours and have 2 lines on the screen. I'd call my wife and say, "Babe, you got to come down to the office. You got to come help me." And she would just sit there, and she's a very gifted communicator, very gifted speaker. She would come in and say, "What's the burden? What do you feel like the Lord's doing?" And she'd just start talking to me and start writing, start talking to me and start writing, start talking to me and just be writing. She'd say, "How about this? How about that?" And she would pretty well craft the sermon. And and on Sundays, I had enough energy to deliver a good sermon. But obviously that's I'm broken at this stage. So I've been invited at this time to a pastors group that just kind of do life together. And they said, would you come and just be a part of us? Just a couple senior pastors that are just sharing life with each other. And they said, so I started hanging out with them, talking with them, and I find myself in this situation, and I tell them, "Man, I'm not doing good. This is what's going on in my life. This is where I'm at. I don't know what to do. I think I'm going to have to get out of ministry because the church deserves better than me." I mean, I can't hardly work. And, they don't know how bad I am because on Sundays, they think I hit a home run, but they don't know what I was doing all week long, just barely getting to the office, barely having energy. I can't even do sermons. So one of my pastor friends said, "Well, when was the last time you took a sabbatical?" And I'm like, "A what?" A sabbatical, an extended break. I was like, "I don't even know what you're talking about. What do you mean an extended break?" "Well, you're obviously wore out, and they started talking to me about vacations, and they're like, "Dude, you haven't taken care of yourself. You've ran yourself down to where you have nothing, and you need a long break to recover. And, by the grace of God, maybe you will." And that was the first time I ever heard about a sabbatical. And they came to my elder team and said, "Hey, listen, we love you, Pastor. We know you love him. Would you allow him to have, a sabbatical?" And they helped me get my first sabbatical, which was a 3-month break. That I was just basically at that stage, I went and did nothing. I went to my father's house in New York, and man, I was so tired. I rested and did nothing. And by the grace of God, that sabbatical, I wasn't completely well when I got back. I was so depleted, even 3 months of not doing anything. I got back, I realized that it was some major adjustments need to happen in my life. I needed to figure out how I needed to recover so that I could do this long term. And so I began to have to really seriously look at my life and go, what decisions do you need to make? They're going to let you continue to gain strength, get your ministry capacity back, get your mental capacity back, your spiritual capacity back. And again, I thank God in my weakness, I didn't have a moral failure, but I can see why people do, right? If you get wore out, this is some of the things with when people get wore out, they make bad decisions. I'm grateful that that's not my story, but when you get so weak and so depleted, man, you really are. Confusion from the enemy is pretty easily found because you're a little bit lost when you feel that way. So I'm grateful, but it took me probably a year after my 3 months gone. It took me about a year of me changing my schedule, changing the way I demand what I demand of myself to get back to health. And from that point in time, I'm like, you know what, I've got to make sure that taking care of my mental, spiritual well-being, my physical well-being has got to be really important if I'm going to do this for the long term. And so I'm grateful for this. What I went through was really tough, really challenging, but it taught me something really important spiritually, which is to take care of. You got to take care of the vessel that God has given you for your future. And I'm happy to say I just did my third sabbatical, which was 14 years ago was my first one. 7 years I took another one. Every 7 years I take a sabbatical, and I just got back from my last sabbatical 3 or 4 months ago. And I just want to say, man, it's just, I'm revived, I'm refreshed, I'm in passion. And again, coming out of going into the sabbatical, I was tired and wore out again. Not like I was the first time, but it's like they're so important because they make you get back into a healthy dynamic where your passion comes back alive and your vitality. So I think it's a really important thing that people commit to do.
Yeah, well, that's a great word. Can you talk a little bit more? What other rhythms did you change after that physical time where you're going, I'm worn out? You said you came in and made some changes.
Yeah.
Sabbatical every 7 years. That
Yeah.
makes sense. What else?
I did change the way we do our vacations because again, I never would miss ever 2 weekends in a row. It was always just one weekend, and it's funny when you're gone and you have to speak the next week when you're coming back. You're really working that week. You pretend like you're not, but you are because you have to get ready for that weekend. So I learned to take a little bit when I take my breaks. I've learned to make sure that they're protected breaks, that I'm not working while I'm on break, that it really is a vacation time. I've learned to, instead of taking little bits here, little bits here, I've learned that for my wife and I, taking a little bit longer vacation at one period of time is better than little short pieces because the older I've gotten, it takes a little bit longer to find the benefit of taking the break. So I've again taken a little bit longer ones now. But my flow in my life, I had to give myself permission to enjoy what I needed to do to rest, which is, for me, I like to play golf. And, golf takes, 4 hours, sometimes 5 hours, depending on where you're playing. But I had to give myself permission, not only permission, I had to basically tell myself, you gotta do enough of this so that you stay healthy for the long term. And, I play a couple times a week now, and I do it with, I do it with joy. I don't do it with guilt playing golf. I do it because I know when I play golf, everything goes away. I'm doing something that supplies joy to my soul. Even if I play bad golf, it's still, I can find joy in being able to say, I'm out. I got these. It actually was my mission field. My golf course is my place where I've got 30 or 40 guys at church because I play golf. Because I get to be a testimony around. I'm not a pastor when I go play golf. I'm just Billy playing golf, right?
Mm-hmm.
So it's been the place where I've got to live my faith. I've got to impact the lives of people. I just, I got a guy that just, this year just, committed his life to Jesus at Easter, and he's now engaged in the church and a professional that I met playing golf, so it became a thriving thing, not just for me in my well-being mentally, for my well-being in my physical health, but in my spiritual journey of leading people to Jesus. It's the place where I meet the secular people. Golf is where I'm around people that don't know Jesus. And so I get to live out my faith, which anytime you lead someone to Jesus, it's like heaven on earth. You're like, this is amazing. I can't believe I got to do that, so it feeds me multiple ways.
That's amazing. That's incredible. Now you've already given us a few tips, but give us one last leadership tip for the church planters and leaders out there.
Well, I think, I would say there's two in particular. Take care of home. I think that's really important. I look at my life and I go, if I didn't have what I have with my wife, things could have gone difficult. And I'm just so grateful that I worked hard at having a happy home, making my wife happy, figuring out what it takes to make her happy. And doing the hard work to supply what she needs from me. And again, vice versa, she does it for me as well. But I think that's so important because life is, as a pastor, life's tough. Church life is tough. And you don't want to go home to toughness. You want to create a place at home where you're, it's sweet and a blessing. And again, that takes work, but it's worth it if you do it. And then I would say, personal development. You gotta keep doing things that inspire, encourage, and enrich you. And going to conferences, going to events that are done outside of you are, when you do your things at our church where we kind of develop and train. To me, those are necessary all the time. We need that outside impact to break us out of whatever the enemy's trying to bring into our lives. And I think demanding ourselves to be fed on those extracurricular things are just a critical thing for, I think, long-term health in somebody's spiritual life.
Wow. Well, thank you. That is wonderful. And you're somebody who's been doing it for the long haul, but you got a long landing spot ahead. You've got lots of time ahead of you.
I do.
I appreciate what you're doing there. Appreciate how you pour into other pastors and church planters and leaders, and you utilize your platform and your church there to help others. So thank you so much for being on. I'd love to hear your story today.
Thank you, JD. I appreciate being a part of it.
Thanks for joining the Leading Conversations podcast. We hope that you found it both helpful and encouraging. At Excel Leadership Network, our focus is on the church planter rather than the church. If you'd like to find out more about us, visit our webpage at excelnetwork.org. Don't forget to subscribe to this podcast so you don't miss any future episodes. See you next time with another Leading Conversation.